Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Fatima and today I'm going to be talking about popular books I didn't like. So the way that I categorized what was popular was essentially like if on BookTube, or at least the BookTube that I've been watching, there has been pretty much rave reviews about these books, or on Goodreads it has a 3.8 star or above rating and are just generally liked by most people. So I might say some controversial stuff, I don't know. These books aren't in any particular order or anything, it's just, I guess, whatever came to mind. And these books I only read within the past year or two. I think there's only one book from last year or a couple years ago that I read, but most of the books that I'm going to be talking about are from this year. And okay, so the first one I have is This Is How You Lose the Time War. And a lot of people really like this. As best as I can describe, this book is basically a love story that's supposed to transcend through time, and they're enemies in a war. I think they're both girls, so it's queer. And like, from the premise, it sounds pretty interesting. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of time stuff and time elements, but that doesn't mean I'll never like any time stuff or time elements. Like the Wheel of Time, I'm quite enjoying. This one, it just felt like I guess the rules of all this time travel stuff felt so flimsy. Like it almost felt like the authors themselves didn't understand what they were writing, and it felt the writing was overly flowery in my opinion. And I know a lot of people like the writing, but I found it overly flowery. I just thought it was overly confusing for the sake of just being overly confusing. Like, I couldn't tell you what the plot line of this book was because it was so convoluted and it made no sense to me personally. And the love story aspect of it, there was no tension, no love, no chemistry. I just didn't feel any of that. And yeah. So on Goodreads, it got a 3.96 rating and I gave it 1 star. Yeah. The next book I'm gonna talk about is called Ready Player One. Now, a lot of people rave and love this book, and basically it is about this post-apocalyptic kind of society where everything they do is online and through video games now, and their whole society is based in this virtual reality. And the creator of this virtual reality died and is now making this kind of Easter egg hunt for people to gain his inheritance and his money from this game. And so we follow our main character. I think his name's like Wyatt, something like that. Let me tell you, this guy is so sexist and like he's such an incel. And also the stakes of this game were just non-existent at all. Like, there was no stakes in this story. Like, I was just like, okay, he's just mastering everything so easily. And then also, like, I don't know, does this count as a spoiler? I guess, spoiler warning. There's a part in the game, in the book, where he exercises, and then after a month, it's like all of a sudden he's fit. Like, as if that was an easy journey to make. Like, like, a lot of people struggle with weight and exercise, and just to say like, oh, it happened in a month and he was so perfect about it was like rude. And then the fact that the girl, his love interest in this story, explicitly said that she didn't want to be with him, and yet he just assumed he was basically her boyfriend. I don't understand that. And then yeah, there's so much misogyny and sexism throughout these books, and I feel like a lot of the Easter eggs that they put, like all the 80s references that they put in there, I just thought they were unnecessarily put in there. This just kind of for the reader to be like, oh my god, yeah, I remember that, or oh my god, that's so fun, yeah, I know that. And it's just like a way for readers to connect, which is fine, but it didn't really add anything to the story. I just thought he was so sexist and so misogynistic, and yeah, and even in real life when he was just like perfect and amazing at it all, it just doesn't there's no stakes, and it just, I don't like the character. I think I tried reading the second book, but I think I got like maybe 2 pages in and was like, yeah, no, I can't. On Goodreads, this got a 4.24 star rating, and what I personally gave it was 2 stars. So the next the next book on my list here is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Yeah, a lot of people really like this book. So basically, this book is kind of like a murder mystery that takes place in this kind of mansion, and there's time resets and some villains. I love big casts of characters, but I felt like the way that all these characters were introduced, it was kind of just thrown and jumbled at you. It was kind of hard to keep track of them sometimes. And then the fact that like all the twists and stuff weren't really, I guess, predictable. And I don't want predictable stories. I love it when stories can take me by surprise, but they have to be understandable surprises, not something where it's just like left field and you're like, where did that come from? It just didn't make sense. I thought it was kind of boring a lot of the times too. And I thought that like the way that the mystery unfolds, it just doesn't, it isn't something I guess you could solve, and in that case, maybe that's why I didn't like it so much, because it just didn't make sense, and all the characters being thrown at you. Also, but at the same time, the twist, quote-unquote, villains weren't twist villains. So on Goodreads, this got a 3.88 star rating, and I gave it 1. The next book on my list is Kingdom of the Wicked. And this is basically about how there is this girl who is a witch and accidentally summons a higher demon that she wanted. And it is one of the main demons, which is Wrath. These main demon princes dudes are based on the 7 sins. And the thing about this book that I did not like, it was just the characters were so one-dimensional and so lackluster, and there was no chemistry between them for like this romance thing that they're supposed to have. And like Wrath, the name itself would imply he is angry, he is filled with rage, and could potentially be violent and like angry. Yes, he was so lukewarm. There was nothing about his character that I liked, and he was bland. He was essentially nothing. Like you could take him out of the story, nothing would happen, change. And you could also take the main character out of the story, and I don't think anything would really change in the story. She was so also bland. She also had no personality, and the book kept trying to push this narrative that, oh my god, she's so smart, she's not like other girls, blah, 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 blah. You know, that narrative. And then instead of showing us, she would tell us, the author. And like there was one scene, spoilers, again, you could just skip ahead to when the spoiler is not there, which I'll put on the screen. Spoiler warning here. Just a short one. It's not really that big of a deal. But there's one time when she was talking to the demon Greed, and she used some language thing, which wasn't even smart, and I have no idea why the demon himself didn't pick up on it, because it was literally one of the easiest things I could have seen ever. And I think any character or any person would have seen that and been like, yeah, that's so typical and so easy, and that's not a smart thing to do. That's just, if you're listening, that's a thing. Like, I don't know. On Goodreads, it has a 4.01 star rating, and I gave it 2 stars because, like, I thought the premise could have been interesting. I like this idea of falling in love with a demon, and I love supernatural elements, and I was like, ooh, yes, let me get that, like, angsty, you know, that angsty teen thing. I want that. Yes, please, I'm here for it. And then I got this lukewarm version of every other story told ever. Every other YA story told ever. Paranormal romance. It was nothing new, and the characters were so unlikable that I just didn't care about it. Also, I didn't like the narrator for the audiobook. Not really relevant to the whole thing, but it's just an extra thing that I guess made me not like it as well. The next book on my list, ooh, this one's gonna be rough, is The Poppy War. Yeah. So basically in this society, it's Asian inspired, and that's really cool. But in this Asian inspired world, there is kind of like this war that's kind of going on, and our main character is poor and destitute and wants to leave her home life, and the only way that she knows how to do that, and the only way that it is possible for her, is by basically joining this elite school, military school. Of course, that means she's gonna be like at the front lines of war and all of this stuff, and I was super intrigued. The first half of this book, I was like here for it. I was like, oh my god, this character seems so smart and so well developed and so likable, and I was so rooting for her to like get places. And in her fight scenes, I was like, oh my god, yes, take them down, yes, I'm so here for it. And then at least around halfway through the book, she became the stupidest person I've ever seen in my entire life. And I get it, like, war and stuff can make you react in different ways. And I get that, you know, trauma and hurt can make you react in different ways. But, like, oh my god, the decisions she made were so... I couldn't understand them. I couldn't understand them. Like, we went from this character being so smart to being the stupidest person in the world. I couldn't understand this flip. The premise of it was so cool, and the beginning story setting with the school was really cool to me. And then we got a watered down version of our main character throughout the books. And I don't even know if I want to continue with this series, because I was so disappointed with this main character, and I was so disappointed why everyone loved this book. And I love character-driven stories, and it doesn't mean that I have to like the character necessarily, but I have to understand them. And I just didn't understand her. On Goodreads, this got a 4.06 rating. I gave it 2 stars. Because, again, like in the beginning, I quite enjoyed it, and I thought the premise was cool, and I enjoyed that the lore wasn't like European-based, it was Asian-based, which is great and fun. But oh my god, I couldn't understand how this flip came to be. I couldn't. So the next book on my list is Milk and Honey, which is that poetry collection by Rupi Kaur. I didn't like it. I did not like these. Okay, like I'm not gonna say it isn't poetry, because I can't say that. Like, if she believes it's poetry, if everybody else believes it's poetry, if you say it's poetry, it's poetry. I don't care about putting labels on things that, you know, I'm not gonna gatekeep what poetry is. My issue is that it often felt like very superficial level captions that you could post on Instagram. It felt so lazy and pretentious, and a lot of her ideas contradict within one poem to the next poem. And I'm not saying you can't have like multiple ideas. I'm saying that she would have often the prerogatives of feminism in some of her texts, and it would be very progressive and feminist forward. And then in another text, it would be like you could see internalized misogyny coming through. For example, like, I broke up with him and now that other girl is like a slut or crappy and you'll only think of me. Like, you don't have to bring down other women. I get you're hurt and that is fine, but you do not have to bring other women down. That is not feminist ideals right there. And there were very, very few poems in there that I enjoyed. Actually, I don't think I enjoyed any of the poems, but I thought some were mediocre at best. It often felt like she had an idea in the shower, wrote it down, and was like, called it a day. It felt like there was no play on words, which is what some poets love doing, right? Like, that's one of the reasons you do poetry, is because you can play with language in a way that you can't in essays or books. And doing it in a poetry form is a way to play with language and a way to have these big ideas condensed into things that you can understand or at least feel. And to me, these poems are very, very superficial at best. And I'm not saying like all poems have to be extremely complex and inaccessible, and it just felt lazy and pretentious. And at the beginning, her blurb was kind of like, oh, if you don't like it, then too bad. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but it's almost like she's saying, I will not take any constructive criticism whatsoever, and just, yeah. And I get it, don't listen to the haters, whatever, that's fine. But, and I'm really grateful for what she has done for poetry. Like, I enjoy that a lot of people, because of her, has gotten into poetry and has wanted to write poetry and has found a way that they can relate and express themselves. And feel heard and validated through her poems, and that is great, and I'm never going to take that away from someone. But I am glad that it's getting youth and younger people to get into poetry and reading in general, and that's great. I love that. And on Goodreads, it got a 4.04 rating, and then the rating I gave it was a 1 star. I really disliked this book. Oof. So the next book I'm gonna say is the second book in the Broken Earth trilogy, and that's the Obelisk Cake. I really loved the first book, and then the second book was so boring. So this world, this post-apocalyptic world, is told in second person, which is interesting, and we kind of see how this society treats these people who have powers to wield or help the earth. And yeah, you kind of see a mother try to save her daughter from her husband and travel across this post-apocalyptic landscape. It's such a good story, and it's like really hard to swallow it sometimes. Yeah, I really enjoyed the first book. And then the second book came, and I thought it was unnecessarily long. It did not need to be as long as it was. I think that you could have probably just cut that second book out, and like, I don't know, like, I guess like you were doing, like, the author was doing some world building here, and that's fine, but like, I think maybe it suffered from this like kind of second book syndrome thing, where the second book just is a lot of world building and it's kind of boring and to get to the third book. But I feel like it could have been condensed down, and yeah, I mean, it was okay. I didn't like it, but I liked it enough. I didn't even like it enough to like want to continue, but I wanted to know how it ended. And then the third book, I also just didn't. I was like okay with the third book. But yeah, on Goodreads, it got a 4.27 star rating. And sequels usually get a higher star rating because the people who read the sequels are usually the ones who enjoyed the first book. So it makes sense. But yeah, I gave it 2 stars. The next book I have on this list is Girls of Paper and Fire. And I have talked about this in one of my wrap-ups before about why I didn't like it so much. But it basically is about this society where we have a caste system. You have your demon caste, you have your steel caste, and then you have your paper caste. And then the demons are the ones in power. So this demon-looking ones are the ones in powers. And steel is kind of like in the middle. They have traits of demons, but then they also have traits of humans. And then the last caste is paper caste, which are just humans, plain old humans. And so every year the king, or the demon king lord dude, takes concubines, 8 concubines, and it's supposed to be a privilege. 8 paper girl concubines. So the lowest class, and it's supposed to be a privilege. And our main character is forced into this position because of her special looking eyes. Now, the reason I didn't like this book was because, again, it's one of those books where it pushed this prerogative of she's not like other girls, where she basically is like other girls, and there's nothing special or unique or compelling about this character in any shape, way, or form. Other than her eye color, which everybody thought was the only thing compelling about her too. I did enjoy the queer aspects of it. I quite enjoyed the queer aspects of it, and I liked the other characters apart from her. But I think what really brought me down to like not liking this book as much was the main character, because she was given, like, she was seen as something super special, but in my eyes she was just like every other person out there. And I didn't see why she would be so much more, like, she would have so much more responsibility in terms of, you know, rebellion and, you know, being the main character. Like, I just didn't see her as main character. She felt more like a side character than anything, and her interests and likes weren't really used. Like, I just thought she was a bland main character. I didn't find her compelling. I love character-driven stories, and if my character is not compelling, I don't want to read it. So that's why I didn't enjoy that book as much. On Goodreads, it's got 3.82 stars, which is not bad, and I gave it 3.5, so I guess I was pretty close. But everyone I see on BookTube talk about this book and like recommend it as one of the queer books to read. They all love it, and I'm like, meh, it's okay. So the next book I have on the list is A Gentleman's Guide to Vices and Virtues. And it's basically about this bi dude who is in love with a black man, and they are having to travel and do like a, not finishing school, it is like do a boarding school because he's out of control. And they travel and then things happen, unfortunate things happen, and then they have to like try to make their way back home type of thing. I didn't like this book. I get that our main character was extremely traumatized, but he was still also a very, very privileged man. He was a white man. And I'm not going to take away from the trauma that he did endure, because that was not okay. He really couldn't see outside of himself. And it was just kind of disappointing to see someone who is marginalized, question mark? A little bit marginalized, not really. He wasn't really marginalized. He would still get away with all of this crap, and he was very self-centered and selfish, and it just, I feel more for a woman and I feel more for people of color than I do for a white man. I'm sorry. I empathize with the struggles that he went through, and again, it was not okay, but he was so self-centered, and I don't know if I really couldn't handle that, especially seeing the other struggles of the other characters, and me personally being a woman and a person of color, and kind of having this white man be like, only my issues are correct and right, and everybody else doesn't know what trauma feels like and hurt feels like. And the thing is, you could, I don't know, you could relate more to other people, but he was very self-centered, and again, I just didn't like the character. So on Goodreads, this got a 4.06 star rating. I gave it 3 stars because I kind of felt meh, but I also kind of didn't really like it. I should have maybe given it like 2.5, but yeah. So the last book I have on my list is The 10,000 Doors of January. So this book is basically about how this girl, this mixed girl, her and her father gets like sponsored to be part of their household because the dad does explorations of these different doorways, or the secret society type of thing, and he's like super, like he would be the explorer for this secret society of this white man. And the thing is, the story was really slow paced. I don't care much for doorway books. Like, I think there are few doorway books that I enjoy. But then again, there are very few doorway books I read in general, but it isn't the type of book that really draws me in. But I heard really, really great things about this on BookTube. And so I was like, okay, sure, I'll check it out. And I was disappointed. I thought it was slow-paced. It was kind of boring. The characters were fine. The characters were good, and I think that's probably why I read it as long as I did. And the plot of this story was kind of meandering, and like I couldn't really tell you what the plot is, because it's so, if you like that kind of book where it's like you get to sit in the world and you just kind of feel it out with the characters type of thing, like that's fine. Like sometimes I like those books too, but I guess in this instance it was just not doing it for me. I don't know. Goodreads gave this, it has an average star rating of 4.06. I gave this 2.5. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope I'll see you in the next video, which will be next Friday. I do videos every Friday. And have a good day/night. Bye.